What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over supers part 5. This will probably finalize almost all of our supers logic, at least for now. It is possible we would have to change things in the future, but I think this will lay all the groundwork for all the basic super mechanics. Of course, they can be very unique, and a lot of things can be specific to each character. A lot of the work is in the camera movement, or the lighting, or the background effects, and all that stuff. So there is so much we could do with it. I'm going to put this here. I think this will smooth out any issues that were with the super, that were remaining with the super still, and I think it will make it so anything you want to do, you know, however creative you want to be, you'll probably be able to accomplish after this. So one of the things that we're going to cover today is going to be this special effect when we start our super here. When you notice a critical art, say in Street Fighter 5 or something similar to that, you know, a lot of times there will be a stage effect or some sort of post-process that occurs. So I've seen many different methods. I've seen a material that gets applied to the character that lights up a certain distance, so it kind of encompasses the characters in like a shadow state. I've seen the character glow. I've seen a render target displayed behind a character that's using the super, so a little video plays, or you know, you have shooting stars or something in the background to make it dramatic. I've seen post-process effects like bloom be applied. So there's a ton of stuff we can do today. I'm going to show you a few of the basic ones. This one that you're going to see right now is going to be the post-process. Now you can do whatever you want with this, but basically when we execute the super move, then a little filter can be applied, and it goes away, of course, when we return. Now this right here doesn't really mean anything. We don't really care about that post-process that we have at this first section here, right? So I'm going to launch again, and we're going to go to a different stage, and we're going to check out the other related factors. So in the previous episode, we were stopping the other character from moving when the character used the super. You know, so I showed you the other time, like if I do this, like this, you can see that the character is still, but they can still move away afterward. Well, sometimes there'll be other things in the scene. First of all, there could be things on the stage itself that are moving, you know, a little bit of dynamic movement on the stage. There could also be things like projectiles that are moving. So say I use my fireball. Actually, that one won't work because I don't have enough time to execute it. Let's say I use my homing thunderball, as we call it. It's a charge attack. And you can see I can use my super here, and it pauses in place. It's tick stopped. We did not stop the particle system, the emitter in that case. So you saw that it was still moving. That's up to you if you want to do that, but that's also simple to do. And we also want to make sure that the lifetime of these projectiles is not decreasing while the stage and all the other actors are frozen. So not just it stays in place and all that, but we want to stop the entire tick. We want to make sure that it is not going to die when we're in that mode or whatever, because we still want them to be active. We still want them to be able to be used. Okay. And with that, we also want to make sure that things like hit stun times don't go down while we are in that frozen state. Sometimes they would because of the way tick and time dilation works in Unreal. So we're going to cover how we can simple check against the time dilation value and determine what logic we want to do and what logic we don't want to do. So for example, if I am to combo from this attack into my super, the character is still stunned, and they remain stunned after the fact as well. So if I were to put the hit stun frames on the mutant, on the light punch specifically, let's say the hit stun frames become 100. No, let's make it 1000 even. Okay, 1000 is a lot of frames. In fact, that's too many. Let's make it 300. How about that? So I've changed my hit stun frames to 300, and now I'm going to go into the game one more time. And we're going to get off the NMBP screen because that can lag the game a bit, and we want the frames to be as accurate as possible. So if we fill up our meter, now when we hit our opponent, they get stuck in hit stun for 300 frames. Of course, that's absurd, but that's 5 seconds of real time. So if we were to hit the opponent and then go into the super, we want them to still be stunned when they come out. Now, of course, the value, the whole 5 seconds is longer than is needed here. Of course, 5 seconds is way longer than the intro, but you could see that the character did not lose their time. To make this even more apparent, if we switch this to 1 second, 60 frames, so 1 second worth of hit stun. When we go back in here, what we should see is that we have enough time to press this, attack, and then go into the super. They're still in the stun, and they'll still be in the stun when they return. See that? So even though the super transition, this guy right here, is longer than a second, because the character was still stunned in it, then they could not move when they came out because we did not decrement the hit stun frames while in the super animation. And that's exactly what we want. So let's get started today. We can hop into the code as usual. Now, we are on episode 110. We're very far along in the series, and I feel like I've been saying that since probably episode 40. So, I'm going to stop saying that. But, we've done quite a bit in this series. How about that? I think that's a good way to say it. And so, if you'd like to get caught up, then I'll leave this iCard right here in the top right corner. It'll lead you to the entire playlist so you can see everything that we've done so far to get to this point and everything that we do after. It'll all be added to that playlist. I will also link this right here, which is the first episode of Supers, in case you just want to get caught up on all the logic we have for our super moves. All right. And now we're going to get started. So, the first thing that we should do today is we should fix up our stun times, so our hit stun times not decreasing when the character is in a super state. This is really important. I think it's the most important because it is directly related to the mechanics of the game functioning properly. A lot of this other stuff is kind of up to you, and you can customize it to your liking, but this is something that's very important in terms of the actual functionality of the game. So let's cover it. So first things first, if you go to your tick function, we're going to add one simple if statement that's going to fix pretty much all of our issues with this. So what we essentially need to do is when we go into tick, we need to make sure that the custom time dilation is greater than 0. If it is, then we want to do all the logic inside tick. Okay, nothing has changed in here, don't worry. But here is where we were reducing the amount of stun frames still, every update of the character. However, we don't want to do that if the character's time dilation is less than or equal to 0.0f, meaning that the character is supposed to be frozen. Due to the way Unreal handles logic, tick can still occur with the custom time dilation, even if it's at a slower rate, and so you will have noticed that the stun frames were going down when the character was frozen, and that's not what we wanted. So by adding this simple if check, if custom time dilation is greater than 0.0f, you can see that I've encompassed the entire tick function, literally. This is useful because a lot of the stuff in here we wouldn't want to do while frozen. For example, if the characters get stuck inside of each other, we don't want to do that while frozen. We don't want to try and move them out. That can happen after. If input was captured this frame or not, well, while the character is frozen, we shouldn't be accepting player input. I mean, you can accept it, but you don't want to handle anything with it, right? You don't want to try and bring them to an attack state while they're in there. Up to you whether or not you want to try and accept it or not. I don't want to allow any charge values to update. For example, my homing thunderball move, I have to hold back for 30 frames and then, perform the rest of the command. Well, I don't want to track those frames while the character is frozen. This cur tick is used to see what values we want to update in the input buffer. Well, we don't really want to update that because, again, we're not tracking or caring about the input to handle it if the character is frozen. The stun frames are what we've already covered and why we wouldn't want to. We don't want to allow the character to go into a command while they're frozen. And we don't want the character to be able to flip while they're frozen. So nothing in tick should really occur while frozen. We are freezing the enemy after all. So basically, if the custom time dilation is greater than 0, it does this. Otherwise, tick gets skipped entirely. I mean, it gets called, but it goes into this if check and says, nope, I fail out, and then nothing in here happens. Okay. Pretty simple in terms of what we have to do, but very important. Changes everything. All right, so let's go into Unreal. And let's look at a few other things. I think the next most important thing is actually our projectile logic. You can do this with any sort of projectile that has a lifetime, or really any object that has a lifetime. So I did it in the default projectile BP. Because in here, we were taking the time dilation, subtracting from it every tick. And then once the lifetime was up, we would destroy the actor. We would also destroy children actors and hitbox actors, things like that. So that's great, but if this is going down when the character is frozen, then that projectile is going to not be stopped, right? They're going to sit there and they're going to update their location, and then they are going to eventually die from their lifetime, and thus it was like they were never stopped at all. So what I'd recommend is this. When the custom time dilation is less than or equal to 0, we are not going to decrease from the lifetime. So very simply put, everything that was in tick is still in there, but just add another check just like we did in the code to do the same thing. We're getting the custom time dilation. You literally check custom time dilation, get it. You do greater than, not greater than equal. You don't want it to be equal 0.0. You just want to be greater than. Okay, if it's greater than that, then we decrease from the lifetime every tick. Again, simple logic, but very important. All right. Now, next thing. Let's go over adding the post-process to our character. Again, there's a ton you can do, so I'm going to make this a little bit more unique, or at least give you the ability to make it as unique as you want. But what I think the best way to handle this sort of post-process and special effects being applied to your character when they're the ones doing the super move is I like to think of, again, Critical Arts from Street Fighter. They do a great job because a lot of times the colors around the character will actually swap. You'll see that they become like, oh, everything becomes more yellow while in this. Usually it doesn't impact the character as well, at least in my experience and from what I remember seeing. However, there are tons of ways and you could do whatever you want with it. So a very, very simple way to have these nice modifications to your character while they're doing their super move, or really whenever you want to do them, is to add a super meter post-process component. Now, I've actually added this to my base character blueprint. I did not set any values in it, except for I've unchecked enabled. So if you come in here, this is my base character because I expect that every character will have some post-process or has the ability to have a post-process. Maybe they don't, but every super move is different, and so all my characters could have a super move that has a post-process related to that super, and none of them are the same. They could all be different colors. They could be different effects for each. Of course, it'll be the different animation, and so I'm putting it on the base character, so every character has the ability to change it and make it unique to their liking. They can, of course, not use it if they don't want to. So come and add a component and type post process. You're going to click this. I've renamed it to super move post process so I know what my usage is for, because you could have multiple post process components. And then all you have to do is if you click on it, you'll get the details panel on the right and disable enabled. You can leave enabled true if you want to test, but you don't want this to be enabled all the time. When this is enabled, it will have the effects that you give it. So if I've always set it to be enabled, then you're always going to have those post-process effects live, which if you're only wanting them for the super moves, it's not really going to make a lot of sense. But once you put it on your base character BP, your children characters will have it. So my child, mutant BP here, has one. And this is where I want to set my actual values. So I picked random stuff. You can go through this. There are so many things you can do with this. You can combine it with materials if you're familiar with creating materials. You can make really, really nice effects out of here. For me, I made it incredibly simple by, I believe I've changed the color grading. Yes, I've gone into color grading, global, and I've changed the contrast. That's all I've done because that's what I knew would be very recognizable from the start. But you can swap out all of these things to make an effect that you want. You can look at my exact values if you'd like. This is all I've changed, nothing else in any of the other fields. So if you want my exact effect for any reason, there you go. However, almost definitely you're going to be making your own. So feel free to play around with the values in here. But I would recommend just getting an example going so that you can follow along with where you can enable and disable it. And then you can mess with it as much as you want after. All right. Another important note here is this unbound checkbox. I haven't adjusted this yet, but this is incredibly important. Okay. So we have this post process and you can't really see it. You just see this like little thing in the center here. However, it is a post-process volume. And so the post-process volume is basically anything in this volume, right? This cube or whatever, this radius that we have is going to be affected by the post-process. So if I unbind this and I increase my radius, then a larger area is going to be affected with this post-process. Now, I wanted it to happen to the entire world, and for a fighting game, that's honestly probably fine, because, you know, when you're in your super move cinematic, you don't really have a ton of space to move around. If you're in, like, a dark cave and you want to light up a certain area with magic or something, then, you know, you could have a blend radius, because you might not want to use the default light system. You may want to have an actual, like, oh, bloom this area, or something like that. And that could be useful. I'm leaving it alone, but note that if you don't want this to occur within the entire world, you can unbind it and then change the radius. Okay. And so once you've made some default or some specific change in here for your post process, you can then go to where your effects are. There's a few places that these will occur, and you can modify them to your liking. But we're going to go basically to start super transition in the anim BP. There's two things we need to change in start super transition. One of which is going to be freezing all the actors, and the other one is going to be following up and actually applying this effect. So this is what we touched on last episode, where we had these other nodes added where we, you know, hid the HUD, stopped the timer, and we were actually taking the other player and setting their custom time dilation to 0. Well, I'm going to remove that now. We don't actually want to do that anymore. We want to freeze all the other actors, either all the actors in the world or, you know, any actors that we choose. We can choose specific actors. If we only want the character and child projectiles or child items of that character to be frozen, we can do that too. I'm going to show you how. So I'm getting rid of the actual logic here to set the custom time dilation for the opponent. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all this over just so it's a little bit cleaner. Okay, something like that should be good. And now I have this instead. Freeze other actors. Now don't worry, this isn't a function that exists in Unreal, so if you're looking for it, you won't find it. We have to make it. But I just wanted to show you where we were stopping the other player time dilation. We're going to do this a much better way now. We're going to open up our old friend base function library. Base function library is a blueprint function library. And I've gone over this plenty of times in the series, but if you're just stopping in, you know, for the super episodes, you might not have seen this. So the base function library is basically, let me show you how to make it actually. I should have done that. So if you go to add new and go to blueprints, blueprint function library, this is what we have right here, and I've just called it base function library. Anyway, this right here is where you can add functions that can be called by anywhere else in blueprints, and in some cases you could essentially call them in code. It's basically this global library of functions that you made, and you want to make them as generic as possible so you can call them from different areas and they can do the same function and perform it perfectly without additional input. And so what I've decided to do is make a freeze other actors and unfreeze other actors a function for both of those. So I just press plus function, add one for each of these. And I've given them the same parameter in each. They're slightly different, of course, but basically what we're going to do is we are going to take the actor that we put in, and that is the only actor that is going to be ignored in my case. You may want to swap this up. Like I said earlier, if you don't want all actors to be frozen, you're going to want to swap this up, because this will freeze things such as actors in the background as well. Like if you have an audience in your, let's say you're in a boxing ring in your match and you have an audience in the bleachers in the back, they will freeze as well, as long as they're actors that you put into the scene. And in some areas, you can actually freeze other components as well, depending on how you set it up. So if you don't want all that stuff frozen, then you may have to adjust this logic a bit. This will freeze everything. This is like the nuclear option when it comes to freezing. So in each of these functions, freeze other actors and unfreeze other actors, I add a new parameter. I just add a basic actor parameter. So if you type actor object reference, and then I call it ignored actor ref, because again, that's the actor that's going to be ignored from being frozen. It's incredibly simple. I have two methods of doing this. I'm showing you them both here. So first of all, to freeze them, all I do is this. I technically do get all actors of class, drag off this, get the world context. World context is required so that this function library can fire whenever, no matter where we call it from. We need to pick the class. You can pick just actor here if you want. So it picks up every actor, which of course is a lot of actors. It is going to loop through a lot of them. So understand that it is a slow operation. And as it says here, use with caution, do not use every frame. And that's definitely true. We're not doing that, so no worries. But do understand that if we do it this way, where we get all actors and we really go this route, it is a little bit slower. If you don't need to do that, what you should do is either tag all the actors you need to pause, or again, get the owner, like, oh, if I have any children of this character, pause it. It's up to you. I'm fine with this method right now. Our performance in the game is still very good at the moment, and so I'm not worried about it. But if it comes to a point where we need to adjust performance, we can definitely crack down here. We're going to loop through them. Okay, and then we're going to drag off of this element, and every actor has a custom time dilation. So you just do set custom time dilation, and we're going to set it to 0. And actually, I made a mistake here. Let me update this for you. Just realized that, caught it while we were doing it. Cool. And so when this is completed, when everything has been paused, now we want to set this ignored actor, the actor that we pass in, so this will be the character using the super, back to the standard time dilation. So this is one method we can use, this right here, to freeze actors. The other method, instead of setting it back to 1 after they've all been paused, you can just check and make sure that this array element is not equal to this element before setting it to 0. Technically, you will add an extra check every single loop here, every single loop iteration, so it's a little bit slower. But if you are interested in doing that, then by all means, you can do it this way that I'm going to show you here. This is the opposite, but it's going to basically be the same thing. So if you make unfreeze other actors, and it also has the ignored actor ref, we get all actors of class, and we get our actor again, and we loop through them again. Here's the other method. Instead of just setting them all and then checking to see if it's the proper one or not, then what I do is I make sure that this is not the element. This ignored actor is not equal to this array element. So exclamation mark equal or type not equal, pass in your ignored actor ref, and then you bring this into a branch. And if it's not equal to that actor, we set the custom time dilation to be 1.0. Now, you ask why you have to do this. You're resuming the time dilation on all the actors, right? Well, it is possible. It's not relevant here, but it is possible that maybe your character has a move or has some sort of ability. Like if you think of, for example, let's say the Flash in Injustice. he has an ability where he actually does, it appears that he slows down time. Technically, it's him moving so fast that, the other characters can't keep up. But regardless of the specifics here, essentially what's going on is the time dilations are different. And so with the time dilations being different, you may want to ignore the actor that you're unfreezing. It's possible you don't want to reset them back to 1 because you may have a specific modifier on that actor. So this is just thinking ahead. It's not required, and if you think you won't ever need it, then feel free not to add it. It's something I've added in as an additional little thing in case we ever want to use it in the future, but you can definitely skip it. So those are your 2 methods of doing freeze and unfreeze. Either just set it afterward or make sure it's not the ignored actor. But there you go. Once you have these 2 functions in here, you can now call these from wherever you want. So again, instead of calling the set custom time dilation on the other player, all we're going to do is when the start super transition fires, which is the event that gets called when we go from idle to super ultimate start. So again, once we enter this animation here, which is the wind up for the super, once we enter that, then this event gets called right here, and then we're going to freeze the other actors. Now the other stuff in here is fine, I haven't adjusted it, but we do want to also apply our super move post-process now. Remember, that's the whole reason we came in here in the first place. Very simple to do. Remember we unchecked enabled in the base character BP? Well, now in our anim BP, if we drag off our character reference, we can get our post-process. So I called it super move post-process, but whatever you called it is fine. Get it, and you'll get this node right here. All we have to do is drag off that, set enabled, and then you're going to check it, which means it's true, it is on. I did this before swapping to the camera, but it doesn't matter. To prove it to you, I've done it after when we undo, and I can't really tell the difference. You may want to do it one way or another for, to be completely safe, but I didn't really notice any difference either way, so you may want to experiment with that and see if you find any differences or anything that looks the best. But I have not changed anything else in this function. Okay? And now what we need to do is make sure we reset these values. So unfreeze the other actors, and also turn off the post process or disable it when we're ready. So that comes from when we're done with this animation, we call end super transition. That's when we go back to the standard fight and re-enable the HUD and all that good stuff. So we go to that event right here. And you can see here what we were doing is we were resetting the custom time dilation back to 1.0. But that's not what we actually want to do anymore. Remember, we have to think about the projectiles and everything else in the scene. So I can get rid of this. And instead, in its place, we can call, unfreeze other actors. That way that works for all actors. I'm going to move this over since we got more space again. And just like that, we're good to go here. We're going to go over to, I put it at the end, but you can put it wherever you want. I'm going to grab my super move post process off of the character reference again. And once we do that, then I'm going to set enabled to false, meaning it's disabled. It is no longer on. And that will change it back to the standard world appearance. All right, and with that, all actors can be frozen, projectiles won't die based on their lifetimes, hit stun times won't go down, all this good stuff. There's something else that you should probably do here, just to fit with our current system. We do have this boolean called has landed hit, which allows us to do things like combos, and it's actually how we transition from the super, the initial hit, into the actual super combo. So to keep this system working, you should technically toggle these off, has landed hit, to be false in both of these events, the end super transition and the return to idle from super. However, we will be adjusting this system and updating it for the combo and combat flow logic in the very near future. So this is really a temporary fix to make sure that things work a little bit better until we get to those changes. There are two other things I want to show you. And they're both bug fixes, but one is really just related to how we changed our input system and how we can make it better. And the other is related to our hitbox changes, and it's something I forgot to cover. So I would like to cover them here. It's also in the code, and my apologies for this one. So you may have noticed that your character couldn't perform all of their commands properly if they had a directional input in them, such as, again, our fireball, backward, forward, light. That's because in a very recent episode, in our move right function, I had moved where we were calling our perform input logic, and we were doing all this stuff above where we did any of the game state stuff and checking to see if we're in the correct state. And that's because I wanted the logic to be applied so that these inputs would still be added to the buffer appropriately when a press occurred. However, I failed to do this correctly. So actually what I did wrong was I had these if statements in here. These if statements are good, but they were in the wrong spot. If you followed my episode directly, your checks would be right here for you. They would be close to this if can move check and all the logic in here. Now this logic's very big, and I did cover it in depth in that episode, and what I said was still accurate, but I just made the mistake of not moving these if statements up here after we added all this other code to it. So that was my fault, and I apologize for adding the code and not swapping this here. That was on me. But basically, all you have to do is in your move right, find these two lines. They should be in there, and you can just move them to the very top. They should be the top two lines. Of course, delete them from where they were later in the function. You don't need them twice. You only need them the one time at the top. And just make them the very top two if statements, and then at the bottom, all the brackets will close them. And so everything in the move right is encompassed within them. That'll fix your issue. Same with move right controller. Do the exact same thing. Make sure you check for this before you do any other logic. And then you just, of course, remove it from where it was before. Sorry about that. I realized it when I was testing with the controller that the issue was there. When I was only on the keyboard, I didn't have a problem, but that was my fault for missing that one check and doing everything above that, because everything in move right controller needs to be needs to revolve around, you know, what function is supposed to be called. If you go into your hitbox actor BP, you may have noticed that your projectiles weren't dealing damage anymore. All right, so when we're in our game, you can see that if I use my fireball, it actually goes directly through the player. And sorry I didn't realize this sooner. I didn't consider it when we were changing the hitboxes, but the reason for this is because our hitbox logic on our projectiles is a little bit different. It requires an overlap to occur for it to be triggered, because unlike these static hitboxes, you know, we attack and a hitbox is spawned, collision can't necessarily be checked right away. So because of this, we have this whole system on begin overlap. Does all this different stuff. It can play the hit effect. It can determine if it should be destroyed after a single hit. There's actually a lot of good logic in here. But at the very start, it fails because it's looking for this hurtbox actor BP, which is what we used before on our character when we had one big hurtbox. But now we have all of these little guys, our collision box, and all of these hurtboxes as well. Or all these, other hitboxes and hurtboxes. So we have high, mid, low, throw, and the actual collision box. Note that these are tagged, if I could find it, as hitbox high, or hurtbox mid, throw. Actually, that one's called throw box. This one's hurtbox low, and that one's push box. All right, so there's two things we should do here. First of all, this cast is no longer valid because we don't have the hurtbox actor BP. Because of that, this get owner will no longer be valid because it's specifically an owner of an actor. So we can get rid of these two nodes, and we're just going to build it up from where we were. So we're going to get rid of this other actor check because now it's a component as well. You'll have to get rid of your reroute nodes if you have them because they won't reroute properly. Then you just make a new one here. Okay. That way it's exactly the same as before. Now we can clean all that up. Now what we want to do is cast to static mesh component as opposed to hitbox actor BP or hurtbox actor BP, because the static mesh component is what all of these are. See? Static mesh component, static mesh, static mesh, static mesh, and static mesh. Okay. And now we need to get the owner of this. This is a slightly different node. Target as actor component. And this is what we use for everything going forward. So there's a cast here. And the owner of this static mesh component should be the fighter template character. If it is, then we'll go into the rest of the logic. If the cast fails, you can still bring it into this branch as shown, because all that logic will still work. This is for the complex hurt boxes, which is the specific hurt boxes, not standard fighting games, but the 3D ones. So you don't have to worry about that too much if you don't have that in there. I didn't make any other adjustments to this entire function, and now everything should work as intended. Just to be safe, if we play our game, I can use my fireball, and it will now damage the opponent. If we want to be completely accurate, and we should because it is important, we need to make sure that the static mesh component that's being collided with is actually one that we want to deal damage, because there could be other static mesh components on our character that we don't want to deal damage when hit. To cover that case, what we need to do is, before we do this logic here, let's give ourselves some room to work. Before we get the owner and just pass it directly in here, we need to check this. See, I'm fighting with how I want to set this up, make it look nice. But we want to really just check the component tag here. And what you can do is actually get the 0 index, because we will make it a rule that our 0 index component tag is always going to be the one, the identifier. Of course, you can add more and still be fine, but we're going to assume 0 is always the one that we're looking for. And we want to make sure that it does not have the name, or that it does have the name, or really that it contains, string contains. Oh, this is a name, right? We need to convert this to a string. Give me 1 second. We need more space. We're going to cast this to a string. To string name right here. Then we're going to say contains. And this is a chunky node. And we're going to look for our naming convention, which is HB. Now, if we do this one more time, we need to put a branch in here. So, even if it collides with the static mesh component, if the component tag is not equal to, if it does not contain the substring HB, which you'll notice that the only ones that do are the actual hurt boxes. The push box and the throw box are separate because they should not have collision with projectiles. So only if it has the substring do we want to go there. Now, at that point you are good to go. This will still work, and it will again only work against the hurt boxes. So if we actually play in practice, we can now go back into here with our hurt boxes and our hitboxes on. We'll see the projectiles hitbox, and we'll make sure that it works as soon as it collides with the outer hurt box, which it did, so we are good to go. Excellent. So now our projectiles are fixed up and are working again. The other thing we should fix is very simple, and it's in code. we updated our input system to work based off of whatever direction we were facing and the inputs we were giving it. In a fighting game, when you have a command, such as my fireball, which is backward, forward, light attack, or backward, forward, light, you know? In this case, it could be whatever you want. But say you have a command that is based on directional input. In this case, I want to flip it if I flip sides. So if I flip sides, I should be able to press essentially backward, forward, light attack and still do it. Now the controls will be reversed. So instead of thinking of backward and forward, let's say we say it's left, right, light. So when I'm swapped and I'm facing the other direction, it would be right, left, light. But in terms of the character, it's always going to be the same command. It's going to be backward, forward, light. That's how we have to think about it. So we were doing some logic in the add input to input buffer to actually make this work before, but I never realized we changed the logic in the blueprint to take into account what direction we were facing and what input it really was. So add input to input buffer here is actually, we no longer need that in there where we swap the directions. That actually puts it at the wrong direction now because we're flipping it twice, which then reverts it back to the initial, which was incorrect. So now your add input to input buffer function in your fighter template character can look just like that. And now when you play your game, you can watch the input stack. I'll play in practice so you can see it. Okay. We load up our game here. And now, if you watch the input stack again, I can do backward, forward, light. I can do backward, forward, light. You see Fireball worked both ways, but look at the input stacks. They're different. We have backward, forward, light, backward, forward, light, but they're different directions. They're opposite, as they should be. Okay? And the same works if we swap sides. So I can go backward, forward, light. And I can go... Whoops, that's the wrong punch. And I can go backward, forward, light. So you can see, now it works regardless of direction and player. Anyway, guys, with all those fixes, we are now looking great. Our game plays very well. We have special effects we can add. We have actors in the world pausing when we use supers. We have our super meter being used when we actually perform our super, whether or not we land. See, there's my super meter gone. We have our super meter actually being able to hit an opponent and go into it. And we have all of our other logic fixed up, like with our light attack, our projectiles. Nothing can be charged when the world is frozen. So again, let's do this one. So if I were to do this, see, any buttons I pressed prior to the state ending do not fire, which is good because, again, the character should be frozen at that point. And yeah, so we're looking great. I'm very, very satisfied with everything we've got so far. This will probably be the last episode on Supers for a bit, like I said, but doesn't mean there won't be more in the future. And I'm also going to do a lot of specific episodes for, like, special moves. One move that gets requested a lot is the Scorpion Get Over Here, where he sends out a spear and pulls the opponent closer. I don't really have the animations for that, but we can come up with something and we can go over them. So a lot of the special moves will be covered, at least to some degree, in the future. But I think this is a good closeout for Supers, and I feel very satisfied with where we're at. So the next episode, we're going to try and get into aerial combat. I started working on it, but there is still a little bit more to do. So I'll let you know how it goes. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. There's more for myself in the channel. And anything else you can do, I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters and subscribers. Thank you guys so much for the love and support. I really appreciate it, and I'm really, really grateful for everything you're willing to do to support me. I love these series, and I'm so glad you guys are enjoying them too. They're getting better every time, and I can't wait to see how far we can bring them. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. Link is in the description. I'd be happy to help you out with any issues that you had. And yeah, that's all I got. So thanks again for watching, guys. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.